So one of the things that I do a lot of work with sales leaders, and if you're listening to this and you've ever been one of those sales leaders or has a sales leader that makes a lot of kind of gut decisions and doesn't really look at the numbers or the math or maybe know how to read those numbers, you're definitely going to enjoy this episode. My name is Jason Bay. Welcome to Blissful Prospecting. In this podcast, I have conversations with reps, sales leaders, and other experts to help you turn complete strangers into paying customers. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, data-driven sales leadership. And our guest is Kyle Vamvouris, CEO at Vouris. And we're going to talk about how to diagnose problems using numbers, how to benchmark against industry standard, and how to tackle kind of fixing the stuff that the numbers expose. But Kyle, always good to jam with you, man.
Always fun, Jason. I love talking to you, and I consider you a good friend, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, we got to meet for the first time. Like, when was that? It's back in February, mid-March, maybe?
Yeah, in good old Portland, Oregon.
Yep. Get some sushi, all that kind of good stuff.
That was super fun. Yeah, I had a blast doing that. I want to come up there again and we'll get together again. But yeah, I absolutely love that things are opening up and we're able to go and like network with people that we might have been speaking with virtually for a really long time. Like you and I, we've been friends for a year and a half, 2 years now. And we first met in person a couple months back. Like that's unfortunate, but it's a good thing.
Yeah. And, we weren't able to meet up with Marcus at that time either. We've been doing this mastermind for a while, dude. We haven't all met in person yet. I guess I've met you too, but you and Marcus haven't gotten to meet yet.
Yeah, that's right. And for those of you who don't know, like Jason, Marcus Chan, and myself, we all meet once a quarter and we do what we call a little mastermind where we get together because the three of us own businesses and we talk about the journey and what we're struggling with and we help each other out, which if you're not doing, you 100% should. If you're a rep, if you're a sales leader, find peers because I think peers add unique value than just mentors. And we focus a lot on mentors, but I think peers provide equal amount of value.
Yeah. Let's actually, if we could double click on that for a second, because you've been talking about that a lot, and we'll get back to the kind of sales numbers here in a second. But one thing that I've really neglected in my life up until very recently, when we started that mastermind, it really got me kind of thinking, I think it was your idea. I think you had reached out about it, was I had a lot of mentees. I had a lot of people that I mentored throughout my career, and I never really had a lot of peers that I connected with, and I didn't have a lot of mentors either. But the peers, you're totally right, because people that are too far out of reach don't really either know or forgot what it's like, to kind of be doing the day-to-day. What would you recommend to a rep, let's say, that's listening to this, that maybe doesn't have that peer group at their company right now? What would you recommend someone like that do?
I would reach out to other people on LinkedIn. I mean, it's the equivalent of like prospecting. Like if there's somebody on LinkedIn, like maybe you guys engage with the same type of content, or maybe if you're producing content on LinkedIn and somebody else is engaging with that content, like just reach out to them and see if they want to chat and meet regularly. Like that's similar to how it happened with us, Jason, because you and I have known of each other for a long time and we're in similar spaces. We have similar sized businesses. And I just reached out one day and I was like, look, Jason and I are in pretty similar stages of our life. Like him and I should just connect. And then you're like, oh, Marcus should be a part of this too. And it just worked really organically. But if you don't ask, you're never going to find that type of resource. And it's a lot easier to find peers, I think, than it is to find mentors, because it almost feels like you're asking somebody to just support you without really much that you can give in return, because mentors are a lot further ahead of you. With peers, you 100% can provide feedback the other way too. And it's really fruitful for everybody involved.
Yeah, and if you're having trouble finding people, just look through the list of people I've interviewed on this podcast. Most of them are reps.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really, really good point.
So let's talk about numbers. You have a story about a time where you messed up when it came to numbers. You want to share that story?
Sure. I was a young, number foolish lad back in my day. So quick background. I actually dropped out of college to do stand-up comedy, for those of you who don't know. So as any good college dropout does, at a certain point, they get very worried about their income earning potential. So that's where I was. I ended up finding a sales job. I was pretty good at it. I was able to climb up the sales ladder a little bit, blah, 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 ran some teams, did some great things. Now I run a company. That's the short version. But there's one experience throughout that little journey that I think is probably the most important, which was my experience my experience having my lack of math understanding absolutely sabotage something I was working on. So let me explain in more detail. I was running the SDR team at a financial technology startup company. We had raised Series A, and we were going for like a big Series B round of funding. It was like a really exciting, high growth part of the journey. And at one point, our percentage of meetings that got passed to the AEs that got accepted, sales accepted, had plummeted. It went down like by 50%. So my boss comes to me and says, you need to figure out why that number has dropped so dramatically, and then present your findings and what we should do about it. So go look at the data, let the data guide you onto what the cause is, and then present your findings and your recommendations. And I said, okay, great. How hard can that be? I didn't even know how to do a pivot table in Excel. Very concerning.
I still don't.
Well,
I still don't.
maybe you and I need to hop on a call. I was very, very concerned about my ability to do this analysis. So I pulled some people who were smarter with numbers than me. I'm trying to do it myself, and I think I figure it out. I get pretty excited. So like, oh, I've discovered it. The data has spoken to me. I'm a wizard. We're going to be almighty and powerful in our presentation. So I go to do the presentation. I create a deck to make it look really slick, and I start presenting my findings. And the CEO's face gets a little scrunchy. Like, what is going on here? And he says, can you pull up the sheet that you used to do this analysis? It's like, yeah, sure. So I pull up probably the ugliest spreadsheet on the planet. And now the whole executive team is looking at it. And the CEO goes, can you double click on D17? Well, if anybody asks you to double click on a cell, it's because they want to see your formula. So I double click the formula, it pops up, and it was wrong. So my entire analysis was like terrible. It was totally thrown out, and it was a disaster. It was so horrible. I felt like a total failure. People were mad. Like my boss was genuinely mad at me, and it was chaos. So I leave that meeting, and I get some help from one of the other executives, which, by the way, I should have just asked for help in the first place, but I didn't. And after that, I go, okay, I need to get really good at the numbers because that was so embarrassing. I can never let that happen to me again. So I kind of deep dove. I learned business analytics. I did a bunch of courses. I did whatever I could to become good at math is what I called it. My journey to become good at math. And now I've yet to be in a room where I'm not the person who understands sales numbers the best. It's really one of my core competencies, and I love it.
So how did you recover from that? Like, was that like how did you feel, I guess, after that?
Oh, I felt horrible. So I often say that there's two sides to being an SDR manager. The first side is your ability to keep your team on track, keep them inspired and focused and growing and hitting their metrics. And there's that people management component. The other side is your understanding of data and operations. Once you go to larger companies, they split this out, but especially in the early stage, you have to understand the data and the operations. If not, you're operating blind. And today there's a lack of data expertise, especially for SDR managers. I would even argue sales managers and even a lot of VPs of sales, where there's not enough comfort around numbers, and it causes you to make decisions in the dark. So what I did, and which is what a lot of managers do, is they lean heavily on their people skills and their people management skills, and they sort of let the data just be what it is. And everything they do to try to improve results is based on their intuition. And it works until it doesn't. And then you need the data to help guide what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. The thing that I see a lot is, people really just tracking two things: activity and then meeting set.
Right.
Or if it's not meeting set, it's qualified opportunities created, whatever it is that the key KPI that they measure is just those two things.
Right.
And when we talk about, just to kind of get into this first part, diagnosing the problem, you go way deeper than that, several layers deeper than that. I mean, it reminds me of, I had really good sales training and management training in my first sales management job. And we had this thing they called it the reps load. And it was the load that they carry on their back. And the way that we calculated this number is we would look at the number of leads that someone, because this is a house painting business, people are going door to door. It's a huge company.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was the number of leads someone had to get in order to close a job. And it was, hey, if someone has to get 20 leads and they can, on average, get, 2 per hour or whatever, it creates 10 hours of work for this one to produce a booked job. And that's just too much work. That's not sustainable. And that was a number we tracked a lot that I talked to SDR teams about. But you have something that's like very in depth. So what numbers are you looking at to diagnose a problem?
Yeah, a lot of numbers. And I want to call out something else too. There's a lot of people who are recommending some goofy stuff like, oh, we only track meaningful touch points and like all this nonsense that I think is really hurting your ability to really glean meaningful insights out of the data. I get in arguments on LinkedIn all of the time where people want to debate whether sales is a numbers game or not. And my perspective here is that we should be very thankful that sales is a numbers game. If it wasn't, it would be like alchemy. Oh, we put all these things together and we stir it and look at our performance, right? But fortunately, we can actually break it down to the number. I can tell you exactly why one person's outperforming another person and where they could improve. So I can read off typically the data points that I look at. So I look at dials. A big part of this is, what are you tracking? Okay. So I'm going to list off what I typically track and I'll explain why I don't track some of this stuff. So there's dials, emails, connects through the phone, replies from emails, demos set from the phone, demos set from email, demos complete, demos that didn't show up, and how many sales accepted. Now, I don't have LinkedIn in here, and the reason why is because it's very hard to track LinkedIn replies. So I could look at LinkedIn's messages sent, and I could look at meetings booked through LinkedIn. But since I don't have replies, it's a less reliable number, so I don't typically track it unless somebody does a good job. With all of that information, I can start to tell you really what's going on with each particular rep's performance.
So are you pulling these numbers from a dashboard into a spreadsheet to then play around with them a little bit more? Okay.
I have the reps at the end of every week. So at the end of every week, the reps have to fill in a sheet. All they do is they go to their dashboard, they see all of their activities and the results of their activities, and they type in the sheet all of the data points I just mentioned. And I do that for two reasons. One, because I want to be able to run all these calculations so I can see it. And two, if somebody types something into a form or writes something down, it makes it more real to them. I do not like automatically tracking stuff. That's not very useful for me. I mean, for me as somebody doing analysis, sure, but the rep isn't getting any value from things being automatically tracked. I want the reps to be just as passionate about the data as I am.
Have you used that app Every Dollar?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a huge Dave Ramsey fan.
Yeah. The reason why I bring that up is one thing that people fucking hate about that app is that you have to, it's not like mint.com where it will automatically categorize things, and it's on purpose. Yep. And I could tell you, man, it's powerful when you have to, especially when you're trying to get your finances in line, which is we were, several years ago. It's like, oh shit, $100 at the bar. $150 eating sushi last week. You start to see all of this stuff really add up, and I love that accountability. Is there another element to this, having the rep fill it out, where you're having them do this to prep for a one-on-one? And is there an element of, I want to get this rep good at diagnosing their own problems?
Totally. That's a big part of it. I say, what do you see here? It's always my first question. What are you seeing? Oh, well, this number looks a little lower. At first, reps go, I have no idea what I'm looking at. Help. Usually is what it sounds like. And then after a while, they start getting it. They go, oh, I need help in this area. I need to focus on this area. And it's like a balloon.
God, that part.
Rick. I think of it as a balloon. Yeah. Like when you put pressure on a balloon, like all the air goes other ways, and then you have to put pressure there, and then it'll go and fill back up. That's what it is. You're constantly hitting parts of your balloon and doing the best you can to keep it a perfect circle. But as you focus on certain areas and it gets really, really good, oftentimes you become less, or different areas become more deficient, and you need to put your attention there. We're always constantly learning and growing and trying to improve what we're doing.
Yeah, I love that. So accountability, empowerment, and one last question before we get into those numbers. Is there anything else that you recommend an SDR manager have a rep do prior to a one-on-one that's related to this in terms of prep? Is there anything else that they might reflect or prep on in advance of that meeting, or bring to the meeting, or send to the manager in advance of a meeting?
I like call recordings. That's the other thing that I'm very, very passionate about. So I have them get their own data, and then I have them grab some calls. And what I do is, so it depends on what we're meeting on. If I'm trying to diagnose a problem that a rep is having, if a rep comes to me and says, I'm struggling, I need to figure out why. I'm also taking this a step further. This is specifically for cold calling, and I'm having them pull their call outcome breakdown. So I get a month snapshot of all the calls they made, and then the outcome of each of those calls. Spoke to the decision maker. They told me not interested. They told me they were interested. And I look at the percent breakdown of each of those outcomes, and I look at the call duration, the average call duration per outcome. And that tells you almost everything. So if somebody's phone conversion is really low, I immediately look at the breakdown of call outcomes by call duration. And I can say, oh, this person's struggling in the beginning of the call. They're getting shut down early. They need help overcoming brush-offs. Or, oh, this person has really long conversation and just doesn't get a meeting. It's probably because they struggle transitioning to ask for a meeting. They're too nice and they don't ask for the meeting. That also helps me like really figure out what's going on.
I love this. It brings me back to my time managing call centers, because this was all the type of stuff. We used Five9. So we'd have 15, 20 reps, making dials, and they were mostly cold calling B2C, which was brutal. But the call outcome breakdown was a really big thing. We'd look at, what are all the top folks doing? What are their percentages? How long are the calls? Average time between calls, all of that kind of stuff, and then comparing it to the rest of the group. But I don't know if you do this or not. I got this idea from a client, and he just started doing it. I thought it was really good. What he has his reps do, because I had them pull recordings, is instead of sending me a recording of one of his reps' cold calls, he sent me a recording of him giving the rep feedback.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what's really interesting is I think if you had reps send recordings over to you, but they are recording a Loom video or a Zoom, and they're recording themselves giving feedback on their own call, it's kind of powerful because you can calibrate, hey, does this person even understand how to grade their own call? I thought that was a pretty interesting idea that he had.
It's funny you bring that up. So what I typically recommend to our clients for onboarding is I have the SDRs listen to call recordings. We have a library of them. They listen to call recordings, and they mark like what they found interesting, and they write what they where they think the person could have done better, with next to zero context around cold calling. This is a brand new rep, and that's really helping getting people into the practice of constantly working on improving themselves.
Yeah, I love that. So what do you do to make sense of the data again? So we have dials and emails, and you're basically following the phone and email. You're treating them separately. Connects or replies, and then demo set, completed, no-shows, sales accepted leads. What kinds of things are you seeing in the data, and what do you do? And feel free, obviously, to provide some context or examples of stuff that is pretty common that you might find. But how do you make sense of that data?
Yeah, so what I do is I calculate. So you look at total number of activity, total number of connects, and total numbers of demo set, right? The more important thing is the show rate, the dial to connect rate. So I made a call, somebody answered the call. Then the sent email to reply rate, and then the connect to demo rate. And then finally email reply to demo rate, and then demo to sales accepted. You're breaking down each one of those KPIs into its own conversion rates is the way to think about it. And then what you're doing is you're comparing that rep to the top performers and to the average performers. And what I'm looking for is percentages that are lower compared to the average, or if it's somebody who's maybe an average rep, I compare them to the top performers. And one of the nice things that comes out of doing this is even the top performers will have a metric that is lower than other folks who might be performing less than them. So let me tell you a real story about this that just happened a month ago. I went and did an on-site training, which I don't normally do. I have a few clients who like really want me to, so I do it, but don't call me about those. So I go to do this on-site training and I get in front of the whole team and we're all in this big circle. And this is about halfway through the thing. And I go, all right, who here has the highest phone conversion? And I'm going to change the names here, but everyone says Sarah, like almost in unison. And they all believed it was Sarah. I'm like, okay, wrong. Try again. They're like, Jeremy? Wrong. Why don't you try one more time? They couldn't figure it out. So finally I go, it was actually Tommy. And you want to know who the most surprised person in the room was? Tommy. He had no idea. He was like, you're saying I convert the highest on the phone? How come I'm not number one on the leaderboard? And then you look, it's because 40% of your meetings show up, Tommy. Sarah, who's the top performer, 75% of her meetings show up. So your conversion might be higher than Sarah, but she's outperforming you because of a different KPI. But Tommy's over here trying to get better on the cold call. Tommy, you're the best on the cold call. Yeah, can we always get better? Sure. But I think it's better use of your time to focus on increasing your show rate than it is trying to become even higher of a phone converter than you already are because you're the highest. So that's how important this data is. And if you're not tracking it, you're giving crappy advice, frankly.
Yeah. This allows you to pinpoint. See, this is the thing I find that's really funny too, is that people like to think that an SDR is just an appointment setter and it's really easy. They're either setting appointments and it's not, and it's an activity problem. They make it sound like it's so much more simple than it actually is.
Right.
And there's so much nuance across that funnel that, I mean, I just look at this stuff, dial to connect, show rates, reply rates, connect rate to demo, reply to demo. I think the last one was set to show. You're able to strategically go in, and if we could kind of break this down a bit, if someone had a low dial to connect ratio, what would you recommend someone like that do?
So that's the hardest one to fix. There's really two things.
No kidding.
One, it's the leads they're calling. So it might be a bad lead list. So if I see a wild fluctuation in that number, I'm usually asking, did you roll out new leads? Where do those leads come from, et cetera? The other one is how often they're calling their follow-up lists. So as you're calling folks and you're adding them into your high priority bucket of people who seemed interested but maybe didn't book a meeting, how often you're revisiting those people, they typically have a higher connect rate because you've connected with them before, and that gets this number to move up as well. So if I see somebody with an unusually low dial to connect rate and it's consistently at that low number week over week, I most likely will be asking them around how often they're calling their follow-ups.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the lead quality too, because another thing, and again, I just learned this in the call centers, it's, data was everything, right? So, and we used a round robin predictive dialer. So no one was stuck in one pocket of data than another person. But when you think about how often people replenish their list and just say, hey, dude, I've been trying to get a hold of all these people for the last 2-3 months, and that list is kind of tapped. Put it to rest. Recycle it. Get them some new leads. Give them something fresh to call. What are your thoughts on? I don't know. I guess Orem has a bunch of different styles. You're the one that I just talked to these guys a couple days ago too. But what are your thoughts on parallel dialing, predictive dialing? I don't even know if people do predictive dialing anymore. If that's okay to do. Those kind of power dialers. What about all that kind of stuff? I know that doesn't necessarily affect the connect rate as much as it does just getting the activity up.
Yeah, that's a big lever to pull for activity. I like them. They're not perfect for everybody. One thing that people forget to realize is that your total addressable market has a finite number. Mm-hmm. So if you have a list of 20,000 potential customers you could sell to, depending on how many reps you have, you can get through that really, really quick. So I'll tell you a story about this. I used to use, when I ran the SDR team, same company as before where I had my big math problem, we were using an agent assisted dialer. I'm not going to say the name of it because I actually, yeah, I will. Connect and Sell. They're terrible. Don't buy it. I hate that company. I hate almost everyone who works there. Hate's a strong word. Hate's a strong word, but they're scumbags. And I will publicly say that. I would say it to their face. I have no problem doing it. Actually, I have. I've told it to people who work there. They're scumbags. I do not like them. I think they practice horrible practices. Okay. So we were using that god-awful tool that is actually a good tool with bad people behind it. And we were making about 300,000 calls every single month. A lot of calls. I had a team I had a lot of people making a lot of calls. So what happens? It was great at first because you're making so many calls, your performance, skyrockets. It's great the next month. It's great the month after that. Once you get 6 months in, you realize you are now degrading your list at such a rate to where your connect rates start plummeting. And then you start calling your follow-up list where your conversion is low. So then you run into this issue where you've basically absolutely blasted your entire total addressable market. You've blasted all of them. So that becomes very difficult for a company where you're trying to show this consistent growth. You've now popped your growth numbers by using a unsustainable technique that got you pretty far, fortunately, but then you need to rethink everything. And then you have to go back to more quality style outreach. You have to go through that follow-up list differently. You need to be following up with marketing in a different way. Your nurture sequences need to be really strong. You have to start using email better. So you have these other things you have to start doing, but if you're not prepared for it, everyone gets into a big panic because they're like, we're not hitting the numbers we were hitting before. And that becomes a real big issue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I won't comment on Connect and Sell in here, but yeah.
Feel free.
I hear you.
If anyone's curious. Weirdos.
Yeah. So dial to connect for show rates. If someone doesn't have a good show rate, what is typically the reason for that, and how would you coach someone around that?
So a couple of possible reasons or a couple areas to look at to improve. How are you following up before the meeting? That's one of them. The other one that people don't talk about as much is how far out did you book the meeting? So I like booking meetings same day, next day. And I don't know how many people are preaching to do that, but I have reps. I tell them, I say, hey, you have some time later today or tomorrow? What's your schedule look like? What about in an hour? Do you happen to be free? If you can get the same day meeting, that's the best. So that's typically what it is they're booking meetings too far out, or they're not doing proper follow-up before the meeting takes place. Another possible reason is because the quality of the actual cold call is a little low, and the person isn't super bought into the why behind them showing up to that meeting. What I typically recommend in that scenario is to either do a better job finding the problem that they're trying to solve. But then there's a technique called the takeaway that has a strong correlation to higher show rates, which is at the end of the cold call, you say this exact thing. I'll just tell you how it works, where you say, okay, great. So I'm going to put this in the calendar for tomorrow at 3:00. I just want to make sure that this is going to be the best time for you. If not, we can cancel it right now and pick a better time. And the person always goes, yeah, I just gave you this time. It works. Okay, great. Thank you. And there's this weird psychological thing where you're almost challenging the time that they gave you, and it makes them like double down that that's the right time, and it increases show rates.
Yeah, it makes them defend the time. That's really interesting. So with show rate also, you mentioned follow-up. What kind of follow-up do you recommend if someone, let's say I call you, Kyle, and you can't meet tomorrow. You got to meet on Monday because we're recording this on a Thursday.
Right.
So what kind of follow-up do you do between now and the meeting?
I typically shoot for Tuesday. I do not like booking meetings on a Monday. And what I'll do is I will send a strong follow-up. The reason, this is what I learned on the call. We're going to talk about how to help you solve whatever the problem was that you have. And that's also, this is a little bit into cold call philosophy. I want SDRs having conversations with these decision makers about what some challenges they're facing are and positioning the solution as a solution to their challenge. So as long as I understand the challenge, and I know I have a solution for that challenge, that's what we're recapping in the email. And then I will, I have the SDR call the day before to confirm the appointment, send an email if they don't answer. And then if they didn't answer to either of those, call them in the morning day of and send them an email if they don't answer.
Got it. And that phone call is, hey, I'm calling to confirm the time tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to talking to you. It's not,
Yeah.
does this still work for you? And just wanted to call and check in
all.
type of stuff. It's very assumptive, I'm assuming.
Right. Very assumptive. Very assumptive. And I don't get too cute with, I mean, you can if you want to, but like some people will recommend, you know, like adding value on those calls. You can. I don't see a reason not to, but I don't get super cute about it. I just, hey, looking forward to talking to you tomorrow. Just letting you know the Zoom link is in the calendar. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You have my personal number.
Yep. Do you recommend sending over any type of content or a case study or anything like that beforehand?
Depends. It really depends. Usually no. Usually no. I don't want the decision maker or the buyer to make a buying decision without talking to the person whose job it is to help them make a buying decision. So I don't like talking about price on the cold call. If it comes up, you know, I guess you can tell them if you have transparent pricing like that, but I don't like talking about price on the cold call. I don't like diving into features on the cold call. I don't like explaining a lot of functionality on the cold call. I do not want this person making a buying decision. I want this person to make a decision, whether it's worth their time to make a buying decision. So I try to reduce the amount of influences if possible.
Love it, dude. What about reply rates for emails? Any sort of stuff that you would look at, sort of if someone's got a low reply rate? Yeah.
So I typically, first thing you do is you look at the call to action. Is there one? That's like usually a good first step. Some people will just put a calendar link or something. It's like, of course you don't have reply rates. So I usually will look at the call to action. How readable is the email? It's kind of like your normal, kind of your normal stuff. Hey, is it simple? Does it speak to a specific challenge they could be having? That kind of stuff. If it's a personalized email, which I typically recommend, that I look like how well did you put that together? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot of content on email too. So with the connect to demo, where do you see people from a cold calling standpoint missing the mark the most when it comes to, I got a live prospect on the line and I'm not able to convert them into a demo for whatever reason, or an intro call or whatever that next step is?
Often they struggle getting past the first minute of a call.
Yep.
And maybe they're a little too pitchy. Here's what I don't like. I don't want an SDR hoping what they say resonates with the prospect. Instead, I want the SDR learning from the prospect what would resonate with them and then delivering that message to the prospect. So this is cold call philosophy. I'm a little different than other people here, and it's worked really well for me. I think all methodologies work to some degree. The question is what works best for you and your market. I can tell you I've worked with organizations probably in every possible vertical at this point. It's selling into every type of business, whether it be enterprise, mid-market, SMB. And I've never seen one thing work best in all of them. Primarily what I start with is a cold call that's around asking questions to learn the current state of the prospect and then their ideal state, and then booking the meeting as we have a solution that's going to help get you from where you are today to where you want to be. That's how I typically promote it. Usually people struggle with those conversations early. That's what a lot of the coaching is designed to help them do.
Yeah. How do you, just to get tactical with the cold call, you had a great video on YouTube about this, but how do you recommend someone starts? Like, what do the first 30, 60 seconds sound like? And maybe give some context into what people are doing that's wrong maybe in that first 30, 60 seconds to get some shut down.
So I'll walk you through the full script that I like to use. For the first part of it's very controversial. Hey, this is Kyle calling from Vouris. How's it going? I like asking how people are. I get this is controversial somehow. I don't care. I've been doing it forever. I haven't noticed it being harmful in any way, so I keep doing it. They say I'm doing good. So, hey, I'm reaching out here because we help B2B technology companies build a repeatable sales process. And I'm not sure if we can help you, but I thought it was worth a call. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions and then I'll let you decide if we should chat? That's typically what I do. So a permission-based opener is, I think that's what you call it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. So I do that. And then I give them a little overview on how we help. And then I ask them what I call the path. Hey, are you more focused on A or B? So a lot of the founders that I speak to, they're more focused on kind of building their first sales function. Is that the same for you, or would you say you're more focused on improving the results of your current sales team? Just kind of made that up. That's probably something like that is what I would say. I let them tell me whether what they're focused on, and then I ask them why that's a focus. And then once I understand their why, I can start doing what I call find the gap. So where are you today? I get them to articulate where they are today. What's your current process? What don't you like about that process? And then where would you like to be? And then I book the meeting based on a promise that my solution can help you kind of get from where you are to where you want to be.
Where do you see, I love that. Where do you see reps missing the mark in that first minute of the call?
So typically they'll get a brush off early and they fold, or they don't have a good response. So they can't handle the brush off very well. And then they're a little bit embarrassed to keep pushing. Another one too is they get shooken up by email. Oh, send me an email. Okay, great. And they get all fired up. And that's the easiest brush off to overcome. So I usually do a lot of teaching around that.
Oh, tell us. How do you recommend handling the email question?
Yeah,
the email objection.
My favorite. It's the response to, hey, send me an email is so good that sometimes I will have reps almost queue it up just so they can leverage this response. So Jason, ask me to send you an email.
Yeah, can you just send me an email? I'm actually super busy, Kyle. And I'll take a look at it later.
Yeah, Jason, I know I called you out of the blue here. I'll send you an email. What's the best email for you?
Jason@blissfulprospecting.com.
Perfect. So I'm going to shoot something over, but I want to make sure whatever I send is the most relevant for you. So give me an idea here. Would you say that you're more focused on A or B? And then I open up the conversation, and then I try to figure out where their priorities are under the narrative that I'm trying to figure out the right messaging to send you in that email. But then by the time you've told me everything, we forget that the email was even requested and I asked for a meeting.
Yeah, I teach something really similar. Yeah, there's a question I got from a client, and it was when someone asked you to send an email, hey, yeah, happy to send an email over to you, Kyle. Do you mind telling me, is this something just for your guys, or is this going to be something you forward over to your team too?
I'd probably look at it for right now, just for me.
Got it. Yeah. And then I go into the same kind of talk track that you did just now around like the fact that you're suggesting priorities, because that's really, I think, what it's all about, is to know generically what people are focused on and then ask them about those things. Right. And then you go on for the call again. I love that. When you say Brushoffs, just so people listening know what that is, you're talking about when someone's like, not interested, you caught me at a bad time, I'm about to go into a meeting, how'd you get my phone number, those kind of things.
Yeah, so I distinguish brush-offs and objectives, objections as very different. Brush-offs typically happen before they have any context about what you do. Objections happen when they've listened to you, they understand what you do, and they have a real reason why they wouldn't want to move forward.
Yeah, I love this. So one of the things I think that's really interesting is I'm just looking down here at the numbers and the different ratios that you're tracking. How much more fun does this make the job too, when you know that as an SDR, you're not just, I need to make all my dials. There's specific little skills that you can work on and little ratios you can manage. I mean, it just keeps things fresh. Yeah.
One of our clients called it the Moneyball approach, like the movie about using all the data to be better at baseball.
Yeah.
It's the same. Yeah. It's super fun. It makes it a lot more interesting. When I was an SDR, I obsessed over this stuff. Not so much the data. I wasn't really comfortable in the data, but I was obsessed with every part of my call. It was, how do I improve this area? What can I say when this happens? So for example, I used to struggle heavily when people were really aggressive on the phone. So if I had someone really dominant and aggressive, I would collapse. I just got obsessive over how can I do better? How can I turn those people? If somebody's angry that I cold called, how can I turn them around? And I obsessed over that problem. And it got to the point where if someone was really rude and aggressive to me on a cold call, I almost knew it's guaranteed I'm getting a meeting. I'd prefer them to be aggressive because I obsessed over it so much. I found something that worked for me and then I implemented it and it started working. I'm like, great. If anyone's aggressive, I already know what to do and I'm going to be able to convert them.
Yeah, dude, I love that.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean,
so,
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I want to make sure. I think there's one of the ratios I missed. You're looking at dials to connects, show rate of demos, reply rate of emails, connect to demos, reply to demo. Was there another ratio that you're pulling from the numbers that I missed?
Let me look. Demo to sales accepted.
Oh, that's right. Demo to
that's another one here.
SAL.
And that one is, they showed up and they were or were not accepted by the sales rep. That one can be a little tricky. It depends if on the reason why they weren't accepted. Sometimes it's a little bit out of your control, but if it's a big difference in the rest of the team, then I usually double click into it and see, like, are you passing over stuff that you really shouldn't be, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about this idea you shared earlier around matching up reps to help each other based on their strengths and weaknesses. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I call it the superpower. So every rep gets a superpower. So if I'm running a team, I want to know everybody's numbers, and whoever's the best in certain areas, I assign that as their superpower. So it's like, you are the best at getting people to show up for the meeting. You are the best at converting at the phone. You're the best at getting people to reply positively to your emails. I give everyone a superpower. And if there's no data to support it, I use something anecdotal. Like, you are the best at making the prospect laugh, or something like that. You have to find some kind of superpower for a couple of reasons. One, it gives everybody confidence that there's something that they're good at. And that's genuine. I mean, for the most part, everyone you hire is going to have something that they're uniquely good at compared to everybody else, especially at a certain point. And then the other thing it does is it forces collaboration. And now the top performer no longer can sit on their little pedestal and not interact with anybody, because their show rate might not be as good as Sarah's show rate. So they better work with Sarah to try to improve their show rate, because they're going to make more money. So that's what I try to do. Give everyone a superpower. I always talk about it. Somebody talks about show rate being low. Sarah, why don't you walk us through your process? Someone says, oh, my conversion is really low. Jeremy, get up here. Why don't you talk about phone conversion? These are the type of things I'll do, and I'll have the reps work with each other more than it always being top down through me.
Love it. So for someone thinking about how do I implement this, this is a once a week thing that you have a rep poll at the end of the week. They'll pull these numbers, send it over to the manager. And what does the kind of cadence do you recommend look like throughout the week? Let's say if I'm a manager or I'm running a sales team like this, how close of an eye am I keeping on these numbers just throughout the week?
So this is where it depends on how kind of mature your team is. I mean like how consistent your team is. If you're really early on, these are daily numbers you're typically looking at. Maybe a good heuristic for this is, the more important these numbers are, the more frequently you should look at them. And daily would probably be at the highest frequency that you would look at these kind of numbers. But weekly is when you can actually pull meaningful stuff from it, because on a day they might not have connected with enough people for this to be really that useful information. So at least weekly. As far as like meeting cadence, I do daily syncs. I always recommend daily syncs. I think it's mandatory. And we usually do like a weekly team meeting, and then you do a weekly one-on-one with each rep, where a part of that one-on-one is reviewing their data. And the weekly or the daily sync is like a stand-up with the entire team, 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, something quick, quick, efficient. I think it's really, really important that you're having daily, especially with everyone being remote. It's just super helpful to have these consistent touch points. Yeah, I love it, man. Is there anything else someone implementing this, and maybe if you think about someone that might be a director or VP that's managing managers, is the philosophy here that I'm going to have my reps do this for my managers, and then I'm going to be able to have like a Google sheet or a spreadsheet or something where I can see a team by team breakdown? And do you even go a layer up there too, where, hey, I can now match up manager to manager, or reps across multiple teams can help each other and that kind of stuff? How does this scale? Yeah, absolutely. So this scales upward just how you described, and each team leader. So let's say you have 3 SDR teams and there's 3 SDR managers. They all have their own data, and that rolls up to let's say it's the VP of sales that they all report into. That rolls up to the VP of sales. And I think really the job at the VP level should be helping those managers understand the data to keep improving their results. And then also providing guidance when there's deficiencies and it's causing people to miss their numbers. That's really the key here. If you have somebody who's not performing well and you say, all right, just make more calls, you're not helping them. Or if you see someone who's struggling and instead of telling them to make more calls because you saw on LinkedIn that that's a bad thing to do, and instead you say, oh, I actually want you to use this new intro, you're not helping them because you don't actually know the problem. It's if we were in the medical space, this would be malpractice. We can't just give advice to people without looking at what could possibly be wrong. It's insane. But we do it all the time. And salespeople go, oh, I've been doing sales forever. I know what I'm doing. You don't know what the person you're speaking to's problem is unless you're looking at the data. So I recommend this on sales teams too. They should be tracking their percentages from stage 1 to stage 2 in the deals, from stage 2 to stage 3. Like, you have to look at all this data and provide coaching based on where they actually need help. If not, you're not being helpful. You're hoping. And that's not really a good strategy long term or even short term.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do you think that these tools like Outreach and, Sales Loft or whatever, you would think they would have some of this stuff built in to the tool? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think is now adding calculations in there, but I don't know. You know what? Like, I hesitate talking about this because somebody at this company is gonna be like, oh, well, we do. It's called this, and it's like in some stupid area I've never seen. But even like Outreach, I don't find a lot of their data all that meaningful. Of course, like their email stuff, like that's fine, but they're not helping me glean insights from the data. That's the biggest problem. And I do get pushback where they're like, we have to use a spreadsheet. What is this, 1993? I'm like, yeah, we do have to use a spreadsheet because it's the best way I know how to generate results quickly. We have to measure this stuff and make decisions based on what it's telling us. So yeah, I wish the tools did this better. They don't yet, at least in my experience. And if somebody has something that works great, send it my way. But for now I'm in a spreadsheet.
Dude, imagine how powerful this would be in conjunction with a tool like Gong.
Oh, totally.
Where a rep, you could log in and it's, hey, what we notice is that your show rate is low to your meetings. And we pulled these specific patterns that we noticed that you're doing differently from most reps in your company. I feel like we're just barely skimming the surface of coaching stuff like this, where a sales manager shouldn't have to guess so much what their team needs. No, they shouldn't have to do it. It sucks that they have to do this work. And what you're asking for, by the way, is freaking minimal, man. We're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers on the phone side, 6 numbers on the email side, and it's already in a report for you, and you're having the reps do it for themselves. This is like, there's no excuse for that, Yeah,
people just get weird with numbers. That's just the reality. And I can tell you by looking at that data, I give the same recommendations over and over again. So it's not like I'm not a wizard. It's very, very obvious what the problem could possibly be once you've spent 30 minutes trying to understand it. It's not a lot of work.
Yeah. Love it, dude. Before we have you take off here, I got 3 rapid fire questions for you. So first one is, if you had to choose between phone, email, and social, what do you pick and why?
Phone. And the reason why I pick phone is because I can actually learn about somebody and then craft my narrative based on what I learn. No other channel allows me to do that the same way. You just simply don't have enough information on the challenges people are facing just by looking at their LinkedIn profile. So the fact that I can have a conversation with somebody and be able to shape that narrative, it's really, really powerful to me, and I wouldn't give that up.
Love it. What is something you believe about sales that most would disagree with?
That most would disagree with? I don't, what I'm about to say, I don't think most would disagree with, but I feel like most people on LinkedIn disagree with me on this. And it's the numbers game that is sales. Like, I have so many people who debate me on this, and it blows my mind. And also, to be fair, a lot of them are marketers too, which is like kind of goofy. Like, whatever that guy is who doesn't like SDRs. I forget who this guy is. There's some guy who doesn't like SDRs.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like, have you run a significant sales org in your entire life? Like all this stuff is data driven, and that's how marketing is too. So it blows my mind that people want to debate me about, like quality versus quantity, like it's a choice. It's not. We could do both. The whole sales as an organization is a numbers driven organization. So I don't know, maybe most people disagree with that, but I don't think they really do if I ask them about it. Or they pretend to disagree with it, and then under any scrutiny, they go, oh, well, actually, I mean, blah, 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 and they just backpedal. So I don't know. I don't have anything more controversial than that.
And lastly, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself as a rookie sales professional?
I'll speak for myself. When I was a rookie sales professional, I would tell myself to calm down a little bit. I had a lot of anxiety early on in my sales career because I didn't feel like I was good enough. And the advice I would give myself is relax. You're going to be fine. Just focus on the process. Just focus on getting better in these different areas, and you will have everything figured out at a certain point.
Cool. Love it, man. Well, it's good to have you on. Can you let us know and let the folks know where they can find you, connect with you, get more of your stuff?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. My website is vouris.com. That's VOURIS.com, the last 6 letters of my last name. But I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm sure people can find me pretty easily.